What is up, guys? I'm Ryan, and in this video we're going to cover some more advanced derivatives and chain rule, product rule, and quotient rule, all for derivatives. So this video is basically focusing on derivatives. We're taking a break from integral, okay? We're going back to derivatives. So as we mentioned before, there are many different function types, right? We have, let's say, a polynomial function type, and that's like x squared, x cubed, x fourth, dot 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 dot. We have learned how to find the derivative already, right? We've learned this. There are some other function types like trig, right? So trig is sine x, cos x, tangent x, okay? We haven't done this yet, but we will do this today, okay? We haven't done this yet, but we will do it. So this is our focus for today, knowing how to do the derivatives of sine, cos, and tangent, okay? There's also other function types like e to power of x, so e to power of x. I don't know what the name is this. I just call it e to power x. Whatever the name is, not the important part. Just e to power of x, okay? You need to, we're going to talk about how to find the derivatives of this. Also, you need to know natural log of x, so ln x. Okay, we will find the derivatives. We'll learn how to find a derivative of this. Chain rule, product rule, quotient rule, I'll do it later on in the video, okay? But this is just this basic overview, okay? So how do you know? So we learned polynomial derivatives already, differentiation already. Now onto trig. What is the d of sine x, okay? So if I want to find a d of sine x, how do I write it? Officially, it's dy over dx, right? So if I say y is equal to sine x, right? Officially, if I want to d this, so it's all right, dy over dx is equals to f prime of x, right? I can also write f prime of x, right? So how do I d sine? How do I d sine? It's the derivative of sine is cosine x, okay? And how do I know? How do I know d this gives this? How? Okay, how do I know? Well, very simple. Look at formula book. Formula book 5.6, okay? Derivative of sine x is cosine x. You just see it. How do you know? You use your eyes and you look and you copy it, okay? Don't use your brain. No brain needed. So you have to know this. Derivative of sine x is cosine x. Similarly, derivative of cosine x is negative sine x. So let's say I have f of x is equals to cosine x now, right? If I want to dy over dx, also known as f prime of x, so if I want to find the derivative of cosine x, it is negative sine x, okay? How do I know? How do I know? It's because the formula book says so, okay? Do you need to know why? No, you don't need to know why, okay? Just whenever you see cosine x, okay? Whenever you see cosine x, they ask you to find the derivative of cosine x, boom, negative sine x, done, okay? No thinking. Finally, we have tangent x. Oh, okay, but tangent x is actually, you don't have to do it, okay? So you don't have to do it. So just have to know that sine x derivative is cosine x. Cosine x derivative is negative sine x, okay? So d sine x becomes, if we d sine x, it becomes cosine x. D cosine x becomes negative sine x. And then the rest, the e to power of x becomes e to power of x, so it does not change. If you're finding the derivative of this, it does not change, okay? Stays the same, okay? How do you know? Again, formula book. Derivative of e to power of x is e to power of x, right? And then finally, derivative of ln x is 1 over x, okay? Derivative of ln x is 1 over x. How do I know? Because the formula book says so again, okay? Now, product rule, chain rule, quotient rule. What are they used for, okay? So, in general, in short, product rule is when you have multiplying two or more function types, or usually it's two. So SL is usually two. So I just multiply two function types together. Okay. Quotient rule is dividing two function types. And then chain rule, okay? Chain rule, so chain rule is, okay, I don't need rule. So chain rule is when you have a composite function, okay? How I like to think about this is when you have a function inside a function, okay? So it's not multiplication or anything like that. So first, I'm going to talk about the product rule because the product rule is easier. You can look at your formula book for how to do the product rule, but I'll just explain it in English very simply, okay? So let's just use an example, okay? Let's say we have sine x, okay, multiplied by x squared. So do you see here we have two different function types, right? Okay, so here we have a sine, this is trig function type, this is sine function type, and we also have, what color should I use? Orange. We also have polynomial, right? So up here we have the different function types here, right? And as you can see here, we have two function types multiply with each other. Trig multiplied by polynomial function type, right? So now we have to, because this is multiplication, this whole thing is multiplication, right? Look at this here, multiplication. This whole thing is multiplication. Therefore, what do you need to do? Boom, product rule, okay? How do you do product rule, okay? Very simple. You have to just d the first thing and do not d the second one, plus d the second thing, do not d the first one, okay? So what does it mean? The first one is trig, yes? So d sine is cosine. Try this, okay? Do not d the second one, so stays x squared, okay? I d this, becomes cosine, right? Do not d this, leave it here. Leave multiplication, okay? And then I write plus, okay? And then plus. Do not d the first one, so copy down the first function. D the second function. D the second function, we learned from the previous beginner's derivative, the intro derivatives video is 2x, right? So like this. So boom, done. Final answer, done. Okay. So this is product rule. Very simple. Remember, just remember, d first, do not d the second, and then plus d the second, do not d the first. Okay. Here, this is the derivative of this, right? So d this, get this. Do not d this, copy it. Okay, then do not d this, copy it. D this, boom. Okay, that's product rule. Very simple. When do you use product rule? It's only when you multiply two different function types. Okay, very important. You're only multiplying two different function types together. When you only have, let's say, a number multiplied by x squared, what do you do here? Do you need to use function type? Do you need to use product rule? No. Why do you not need to use function type? Product rule, because this is just a number, right? It's not a function, right? This is polynomial, yes, but what is this here? This is just a number, right? So you do not use product rule here. Remember, you only use product rule when you have two function types, okay? Not just a number. If it's just a number, you just drag it down. Very simple, right? Just drag it down. The answer here is 4x, right? No need to use product rule, okay? Now, onto quotient rule. How do you do quotient rule? Let me change to green, because green is quotient rule. Quotient rule is when you're dividing two function types together, okay? So let's take an example. If you're dividing, let's say I have example, so now it's quotient rule, okay? So let's say I'm dividing sine x divided by x squared, okay? So now how do you use quotient rule? Do you see how here we have this is a trig function divided by a polynomial function, okay? Again, two different function types, therefore I am allowed to use quotient rule, okay? Then how do you do quotient rule? All I remember is low, d, high. Oh, actually, let's just do it. Low, d, high, and then minus high, d, low, over low, low, okay? I like to memorize it like this because sounds funny and it helps me memorize it, okay? So what it means is you need to copy down the low, okay? What does low mean? Low means the thing in the bottom, right? Obviously, if it's in bottom, we call it low. Intuitive, common sense, okay? So if we just copy down the low, it's just x squared here, okay? How do I know this is x squared? How do I know this is x squared here? Because this says low, therefore I copy this thing down here. This is in the low position, okay? Now I need d, the high. What is my high? High is obviously trig function, this sine x here, right? Because it's in the top, so I call it high. So d, the top function, d sine x becomes cosine x, okay? Okay, then subtraction is always there. Subtract is just subtract, okay? Then high, d, low. What is high? High is sine, right? So I copy down the sine here, sine x, okay? D, the low is 2x, okay? Again, high means this, just copy it over. No need to do anything. D, the low is 2x. Copy it here, okay? D, the low, then put it here, okay? So I have x squared cosine x minus sine x 2x, okay? Now, can you guys guess what is in the bottom? In the bottom, I said low, low. That means low times low, right? Also known as low squared. So if you don't like low, low, you can write this as low squared like that, okay? Also doable. Now, what is low squared? So x squared times x squared, right? Which is equals to x4. So I'll write this as x to the power 4, okay? Very easy, very simple. So final answer, boom. This is your final answer, done. Quotient rule, boom, done. Okay, just remember, low, d the high, minus high, d the low, over low squared. Okay, that's it. And chain rule, finally, we have chain rule. Chain rule is in purple, so let me change my color back. Chain rule. Okay, when do you use chain rule? You use chain rule when you have a function inside a function. What does it mean by function inside a function? Let's say I have sine x like this. This is just one function, right? How do I put a function inside a function? Well, obviously it's if I have x squared like this. Okay, so if you think about it, how do I think about it? A lot of students get confused with this chain rule because they can't identify what is a function. Okay, now how do I think about it is like this. I think I break it down like this. So sine is supposed to have a box here that I'm supposed to fill something in, right? And also when I have an x, I'm supposed to fill in a number here, right? So clearly here I have two function types because I filled in a number for x here, and I also filled in something for this box here. Okay, so as you can see, this can be broken down into two function types. We can break it down to sine x, and we can break it down into x squared. So again, two function types. Function type number one is here, polynomial, and function type number two here is trig. Okay, so you can see that there is a function inside a function. Okay, and how do we do the chain rule? In order for us to do the chain rule, I just remember it as we work outside in. Outside, then inside. Okay, whatever you have on the outside, you work on the outside first, then on the inside. Okay, so how do you do the chain rule? To put it simply, we just have to d the outside, copy everything, and then multiply it by the inside deed. Okay, so what do I mean? So first is you need to identify what is your outside function, what's your inside function, what are your layers. Okay, sometimes you can have multiple layers. Okay, but in our example, we only have two equations here. I mean, two functions here, right? Therefore, we only have two layers. Layer one is this, layer two is this, right? Layer two is inside layer one. So we start with layer one first. What is the d of layer one? D of layer one is cosine, right? So I just copy cosine, and what I put in this box, okay? Whatever is inside, whatever is in the next layers, I copy everything down. So I did layer one, okay? I did layer one, I get cosine, right? Cosine something. Now what do I put in this something, okay? I put in this something, whatever is in my next layer, okay? Next layer is x squared, so boom, I just put x squared here. Does that make sense, okay? Now, then I need to multiply by the d of the next layer. So d of the second layer now, this second layer is x squared, right? So how do I d second layer? Boom, 2x, just like that, okay? So the d of sine x squared is just 2x cosine x squared. Boom, final answer, done. Does that make sense? Okay, let's try one more example question, because usually chain rule is where people get most confused with. So let's say we have cosine e to the power of x squared. Okay, so first step is identify how many layers do you have. Okay, how many layers? Well, obviously I can break it down into cosine x, right? This is my first layer. What's my second layer? Second function type. I can see that I have e to the power of x, right? And what's my third layer? I also see I have x to the power of 2, okay? If you guys cannot recognize this, x power 2 is right here, okay? Whereas my second layer, ex is right here, okay? And what's my first layer? My first layer is all the way out here, so, okay, like that. So obviously this is first layer, layer 1, and then this is layer, and then we have layer 2 and layer 3. Okay, and what do? We said, as I said before, we work from the outside in, right? With chain rule, we work outside in. So first we need to do d of layer 1. What is d of layer 1? D of cosine is negative sine, right? And we have to put in something in the brackets, right? What do we put in the brackets? We put in everything that is in the next layers, okay? So what is in everything in the next layers? Basically just this, right? So we put it into here, ex squared, okay? And what do we need to multiply by? We need to multiply by the next layer, right? Next layer, just like what we did here. We have to multiply by the next layer, okay? So our next layer is layer number 2, okay? So we have to multiply by the d of the second layer, okay? What is the d of second layer? E to the power of x, right? But do I put the x here? No, I do not, because I need to put in the next layer stuff, right? Next layer stuff, so x squared here. And then what's last? I need to multiply by the d of the last layer, so 2x, okay? And did I put x here? Yes, because there's no more layers here. There's no more layers, right? So again, this is the d of layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Again, layer 1, I have layer 2 and layer 3 inside, right? And then for layer 2, after I d it, I have the layer 3 inside. This layer 3, right? And then for the layer 3, when I d it, I have nothing on the inside because there's no layer 4. Okay? So this is your final, this is your final answer. You can simplify it if you want. this is it. So do you see how this chain rule can have multiple layers? You can have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, however many layers you want, okay? But the concept is like this. Just D from the outside in, separate your layers, make sure you can identify what are your different layers and how many different layers you have, okay? In the next video, we're gonna go over some more practice questions to hopefully clear up any confusions you guys might have, okay? So good luck, and until my next video, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.